I'm joined by Executive Vice President of Football Operations for the United States Football League, Mr. Daryl Moose Johnston. Mr. Johnston, how you doing?
I'm doing awesome, RJ. How you doing?
I'm doing amazing. Like, this is a great day for me. I told you before we started taping, huge Dallas Cowboys fan, and it's a thrill for me. But I want to talk about what is an even more just awesome thrill for me is the USFL draft was just held. You had a big role in that. You helped put together this draft pool. Can you give us just a little insight into what it was like for you to just try to build, quite literally, a league that folks could draft 8 teams from that are going to have 38 active players and 7 players on the practice squad as they play 10 weeks of football all the way through to the July 4th weekend?
Yeah, that was a big challenge. You know, that first draft was going to be 280 guys drafted, and obviously the most important thing for us is going to be the product on the field that the fans get to watch. So there was a lot of pressure on us to make sure we were getting the right people. The pandemic over the last 2 years has really kind of muddied the waters a little bit. So there's been a lot of guys that have gotten lost during this transition with extra time at college, bypassing drafts, skipping seasons. So there's some information and data that was, a little bit challenging for us to kind of track down and really kind of connect. We use the networks of all the people that are a part of the USFL family. We're blessed to have 8 really, really good scouts with us that then became team directors, NFL experience, college experience, know the college game, know the NFL game. They shared information. They worked together as a team. And that's been, for me, the most gratifying thing so far during this journey is to watch everybody work in unison as one team. So we hadn't gotten to the part yet where we were competing against each other as franchises. We saw a little bit of that once the draft started last week. But up until that point, the guys were great at sharing information and making sure that we were able to get the best players available at every position into that draft pool in a short amount of time.
I was really ecstatic to see the quality of quarterbacks, in particular, the guys that people know about, right? Shea Patterson coming out of Michigan, Jordan Ta'amu coming out of Ole Miss, but also guys that I don't think a lot of folks are familiar with, quarterbacks like Brian Scott, for instance. Ben Holmes is another one. How did you go about evaluating quarterbacks and selecting those guys that would be among those 8 that were chosen in the first round?
It was really just, what you're doing with every other position. Who are the best guys there? Who are some of the contacts that you have? I think the coaches were really helpful at that point, knowing the offensive system that they were going to put in place and what quarterbacks would fit those systems the best. And I think you saw that with Brian Scott. I think you see that with Ben Holmes. When we talked to Mike Riley, Ben Holmes was high on his list from the very, very beginning. Over 5,000 yards at Tarleton State. When you talk to Bart Andrus, Brian Scott was very, very high on his list. When you talk to Brian Scott, what I like about him is he's got a little bit of that chip on his shoulder, but it's a good chip. Sometimes people wear that and it has a negative component to it. Brian he wears his chip with a very, very positive component to that. So, I've always been a guy that was wired to prove people wrong. And several years ago, I had a guy that just absolutely shifted my whole thought process in that situation as to proving people who believed in you right, as opposed to proving people who doubted you wrong. And it's a real powerful shift. And Brian Scott has that. He kind of comes from that background of proving those who believed him right, as opposed to proving those who doubted him wrong. I'm excited to see both of those guys. And you mentioned the other guy, Shea Patterson. It was really kind of one of those things that sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. I think that Jeff Fisher and Steve Kaiser had a guy picked out that they wanted to have in Michigan that was going to be one of their top people, and things just didn't work out there in that situation. And Shea Patterson was exiting the CFL right at that exact same time. For us to be able to start our first draft in the USFL with Shea Patterson from the University of Michigan going to the Michigan Panthers was just one of those things that you couldn't script any better. And it got our evening off to a great start that night when we introduced the quarterbacks.
I'm getting ready to tell folks a list of the 10 exciting players for me. And the Panthers have 2 of them, right? One of them is Shea Patterson. And then right there at the very end of the first day of the draft, Paxton Lynch sneaks in there to the Michigan Panthers. I said, wait a second, the same one? And they said, yeah, the same one. Another guy that was exiting the CFL, not unlike Shea Patterson. How did that come together, and how did it come together so quickly?
A lot of great work by the people within our team. We do have some ties back into the CFL, so we have a lot of guys that are monitoring what's happening there. That was really our competition for the players. If we were a little bit slow in making decisions or getting people to buy into what our vision was, there was a chance that they could leave for the CFL, and that was something that was going back and forth a little bit through that whole process. We lost some players to the CFL. The CFL lost some players to the USFL. I think it was a pretty fair balance at the time. But as you pointed out, for us to be able to get two high-profile quarterbacks like that, and then to have Michigan bookend the draft with Shea Patterson starting the night and Paxton Lynch ending the night, again, I mean, can you script that any better? So, it's something that I'm sure that we'll continue to butt heads with a little bit as we move forward. We're both competing for players. It's our message to them is, if you come to the USFL and play, you're going to play 10 regular season games, hopefully get into the playoffs and then go to the championship game. That'll be July 2nd. That gives you plenty of time to rest, recover, and then elevate your status as an NFL player and get into a camp. If you go to the CFL, you forfeit that whole cycle again. You're not getting into the NFL until at some point in 2023. So we think we have a lot more to offer than the CFL does in the hopes of getting back and chasing that NFL dream.
It is an important distinction, right? One in which the USFL season wraps up that 4th of July weekend, right as training camp is getting ready to start in the NFL, and the CFL season wraps up in October. So I'm glad that is played into strategy, and it's really interesting to me to hear that coming from you. But also, I got to hit on this. You seem to have a real passion for spring football, right? Having been a part of, I believe that this is your third league, or is it your fourth league as
my third
administrator? Your third league league as an administrator in spring football leagues. Why do you like this side, literally, of football?
Well, I think it all starts from what every ex-NFL player wants to find out is everything that I've experienced during my career as a football player, going all the way back to high school. You're taking little bits and pieces from all those people who influenced you, or who taught you lessons, on your journey through the game of football, college level, professional level. You hear all the coaches' sayings, you watch film as you get ready for your opponents, you start to see things a little bit differently, as a player, as you grow and mature. For me, it was, if I got a front office opportunity, would all those things that I've learned and experienced through the years help me assemble a championship roster? I've been blessed to have been on a championship team at the high school level, an undefeated team at the college level, and 3 Super Bowl championship teams in the NFL. I know what it looks like as a group. I know how to get it to that point, but can I find the individual elements to bring together as a team? And how do I balance the talent and the culture that I want to provide and create, in that setting? So that was the intrigue to kind of come into it at first, but it really shifts immediately once you get around these guys that play in the spring league. And I've already heard it from our head coaches, how passionate they are about the game, why they're there, what they're still doing. Are they still chasing that dream of the NFL? Are they just doing it because of the love of the game? And this is really my only opportunity at this stage of my career to be able to continue to play football. Those are some of the great things that happen. And we've already had some of our coaches just after the draft with conversations that they've had with their players really kind of hit them in a different way, something that they've missed, over the years as coaches. And I said, wait till the season ends and you watch some of these guys go on and have that opportunity. Their time with you gave them the opportunity to continue to pursue that NFL dream. And we've had that happen with multiple players, whether it was the Alliance of American Football or the XFL. In both of those 2 spring leagues, we've sent players back into the NFL, guys that were stuck in that practice squad mentality. We've gotten them back onto the active roster. So that's one of the things that has really brought me a lot of joy and sense of accomplishment, is really kind of having the opportunity to send a young man's life on a completely different trajectory than what he had before we met.
It was one of the privileges of the job that I do is telling stories and getting to see how those stories unfold. And I was floored just with the gratitude that many of the players had for being in this position.
Exactly.
Especially not knowing a whole bunch about what they were going to do once they got to Protective Stadium on Tuesday, and then to see how it all unfolded for them, and genuinely surprised and genuinely happy, and getting to talk with them about what they were doing before. Like, for instance, Jordan Tamu, right? He's flying back from Hawaii to be here for the draft, but just before then, he had been working as a personal trainer in Nashville, and he's excited to be able to play professional football once again. But I wonder, do you have that same feeling when you talk to coaches in particular? Like, I'm going to ask you about each one of these 8 coaches that are outstanding in their own ways, but let's start with Jeff Fisher, a guy that had not been coaching at all, who decided, no, this is where I want to be. This is what I want to do. What did you glean from him that made the USFL particularly attractive to a man with his track record?
Right. Just what an honor for us to have somebody like Jeff Fisher that believes in our vision and what we're trying to do. He's going to be such a tremendous asset for us, so much beyond what he's going to bring as a head coach. His time on the competition committee in the NFL, what he's done in front office work with his GMs as a head coach. He knows the day-to-day routine. He's somebody that I lean on quite a bit because I've always seen it from a player's perspective. I'm starting to dip my toe in the water of seeing it from a front office perspective. But what about the head coach, which Jeff has done for a number of years in the NFL at the highest level? He knows what the league needs to look like, what the day-to-day has to be about. And it's always going to be player-centric. So, Jeff is going to be invaluable to us moving forward in building this because he's got perspective and input on so many different levels. It's going to be critical to us building this the right way. So we couldn't be happier. And that's above and beyond what Jeff brings as a head coach, an evaluator, a creator of culture to have success and to try to win championships. So he also adds a ton of credibility to us, right? He's got that reputation where when people see Jeff Fisher involved in it, it's like, wow, that's legit. That's a good coach. I love all 8 of our coaches. I love how all 8 of them work together. But to be able to have Jeff Fisher be a part of our staff, that was a huge accomplishment for us.
I was really genuinely just flabbergasted that he had not been up on what the reception had really been like when he was named as the Michigan Panthers head coach. And I was in a really cool position to where I was like, hey, what do you think about the Fighting Jeff Fishers? He said, the what? And I said, the Fighting Jeff Fishers, that's trending on Twitter. And he goes, show it to me. So I pull it up the phone and I'm showing it to him and he's genuinely awestruck. He's like, I haven't been on Twitter for obvious reasons, but I'm also evaluating some 500 to 800 players trying to put together a team. But it's really exciting to see how people have really been receptive to the USFL. And again, I think we're talking about your coaches and how people already have some sort of knowledge of who they are. But when you get into their backgrounds, you have more NFL experience. Guys like Mike Riley, who was a head coach at the San Diego Chargers, but a guy that, I'm a young buck, right? So I get to know him as a head coach in Nebraska at Oregon State. But the deeper I go, that man has been coaching football for a very long time, and it's quietly been one of the better quarterbacks coaches in the sport. I wonder, what were the conversations like when you were trying to recruit Mike Riley to be a coach in this league?
Oh, it was easy for me. I spent time with Mike Riley in San Antonio with the Alliance. Mike was my head coach when I was a general manager. I'll never forget when it was announced that I was going to be the GM for San Antonio and that Mike Riley was the head coach. You people that I have the ultimate respect for in the NFL game called me and said, you couldn't have gotten a better guy to work with your first go around. Andy Reid, Jason Garrett, Norv Turner. My phone is just, ringing with messages going, congratulations. What a great opportunity for you to work with a guy like Mike Riley. And they couldn't have been more correct. He was awesome. Just very, very even keeled, but competitive. Just a real great balance on how he approaches the day to day. He makes it fun. He makes it enjoyable. You talk about his savvy and his knowledge at the quarterback position. When he was out, working with USC, there happened to be a guy in Southern California named Tom Brady who was trying to get USC to recruit, and they didn't see the same thing that Mike Riley saw. So he snuck off to Michigan. So it's somebody who can see the potential in players. And I think that's why I'm really excited to see what Ben Holmes does this year, because Mike Riley was emphatic about getting him involved. And you go back to what he did at the University of Nebraska, what he did at Oregon State. This is somebody that comes from a professional background who probably has a lot of the Norv Turner system that I played in back in the 90s. When he was down in San Antonio and we were practicing in Austin, he would come up and watch our practices. So he's got that pro style of passing game, but he also, has woven that in with the collegiate game of the meshes underneath. That's going to be the exciting thing for me to watch is what kind of offense he puts together for Ben Holmes to function in, because Ben is definitely somebody that Mike is very, very excited to have. And I'm excited to see what they do together as head coach and quarterback.
And that roster is really inspiring to me. Also backing up Ben Holmes, 12th round pick, DeAndre Johnson, who, as many folks would know, myself, have seen on Last Chance U, and I'm excited to see what he can do with the tutelage of a guy like Mike Riley and what he and Ben Holmes figure out about each other. Another guy they drafted for the New Jersey Generals, Mike Weber, former Ohio State tailback, who's really great. Like that's a team that I'm circling, and many other folks should circle as they're going to open the season against the Birmingham Stallions on Fox and NBC on April 16th. But another guy that I got to know, and I'm excited for people to get to know, is Pittsburgh Maulers head coach Kirby Wilson, who divulged to me that his first professional football coach was Mike Riley, right? When they were with the Winnipeg Bombers. And I'm like, yo, and he's like, hey, look, I even got traded at 21, and Mike was telling me, hey, it's going to be good for you. It's going to be okay. And sent me on my way. And I got my itch of coaching in large part because of Mike Riley. And I got to see them have some exchanges. They were going at each other about players in the draft that both of them wanted and stealing from each other. It was really great camaraderie. But to dig into Coach Wilson, and I spent a good amount of time with him on Wednesday, you get to know he's one of the better running backs coaches, perhaps of all time. 2 Super Bowl rings. He's putting together a roster that is really fresh. I love that he is in on his coordinators. What did you do to get a guy like Kirby Wilson to accept this as his first head coaching opportunity?
Oh, we didn't have to do a lot because, as you pointed out, this is his first head coaching opportunity. You know, he was chomping at the bit. He was one of those guys that was reaching out to us. And I've met a number of guys over the last, 5 to 8 years in the NFL, and you wonder why they haven't had that opportunity yet. And Kirby's one of those guys. His passion for the game is blatantly obvious every time you talk to him. He asked me, hey, and this is years ago, hey, can I have some guys call you from time to time, running backs and things like that, when I'm working with them, just to give them some advice, away from the game, about the game, how to be a pro, how to handle your day to day. He got me in touch with Alex Ingold, kind of talking to him about the fullback position. Kirby he goes above and beyond. And I've already seen that, with him just in the short amount of time that he's had this head coaching opportunity. We went out and we've got the teams practicing in different places, and Mike and Kirby are going to be out at Miles College. And Kirby was so excited because, driving into Miles College, it reminded him of the neighborhoods that he grew up in. I think that he's going to be good, not only for the Pittsburgh Maulers and the USFL, but I think he's going to be really, really good in the community of Birmingham, Alabama, because he's going to bring some real world wisdom to some of these opportunities for these guys. And he's going to be able to share things. So we're excited about what Kirby's going to do. I think he had a heck of a night on draft night. He was one of those guys that I think a lot of people were like, everybody's looking at, Skip Holtz and Larry Fedora, Kirby Wilson, how are they going to do compared to a Jeff Fisher, a Todd Haley, a Mike Riley, guys that have been there, done that. I thought Kirby Wilson and Chris Watts, the combo there in Pittsburgh had a heck of a night at the draft. And I'm really excited to see what they do.
They were very enthusiastic about getting their guy involved too, Kyle Laletta. One of the cool happenings at this event was the quarterbacks getting to know their coaches for the first time, and the coaches going, hey, sit down, tell me what you see here, give me your insight, and let's make some picks here. And then for Coach Wilson to get the Boys and Girls Club involved, A.G. Gaston was on hand, handing them pick cards to run up to the president at the USFL, Brian Woods, to make those picks. That was really cool to see. I'm excited. I'm a Tulsa guy, right? So he coached Josh Jacobs at the Las Vegas Raiders, and we were able to bond over that because Josh grew up down the street, and you keep going down the list of guys that he's worked with, and I don't know how his roster is not excited to speak with him. As a matter of fact, I get Bailey Gaither on the phone after he's getting drafted, and I said, he's got 2 Super Bowl rings. He said, he does? Okay, I better button up. I'm going to be told what I need to be doing, and I'm going to listen. I said, that's great. That's awesome. Coach, it's Coach Fedora that I am really interested in because I'm an OU guy, right? He coached at Oklahoma State. I first got to know him at Florida. But this, along with Kevin Sumlin and Skip Holtz, is going to be his first opportunity to coach professionally. And I asked him straight up, what is it like for you to not have to recruit anybody, to just evaluate him? He says, well, evaluation is evaluation. But this whole being able to select a player, I think I kind of like that. I wonder, what was your feedback from them, the college coaches in particular, like Larry Fedora, and how this process went?
I think all three of them went about it in a little bit of a different way. And I think that was probably based on who their team director, the personnel guy was that was helping them out through the process. Skip Holtz, it was so funny that Skip was one of the guys who was always asking questions, always trying to get information, very prepared in what he was doing, because this was his first time. He just wanted to feel comfortable going into that environment. And one of the things that we really threw at our coaches is there was a lot of players that came into that pool, kind of late in the process, and they did a great job of delegating responsibility, letting the positional coaches bring the names to them, and then kind of getting them ranked in an order. And I remember Skip one time telling us, he goes, that's a lot of guys, and we're really stressing our staff to get this done. And then it's so funny because the guy that they take in the offensive tackle group with their first pick was a guy that I know for a fact, because I was one of the people working on getting him his contract sorted out and getting him into the draft pool Monday night. So here's Skip saying, how are we supposed to do this? And I'm like, well, you figured it out somehow, because you had one of the last guys in the pool drafted first overall in the tackle position. So they found a way to do it. Larry Fedora he's been one of my favorite guys. He's one of those guys that you get around, and he's fun to talk with, very enjoyable, very courteous. But boy, is he driven. You can see that kind of fire inside of him, and it pops up every once in a while. And he's one of the people that I've learned is really, really good at making decisions in the moment and making the right decision in the moment. That's one of the things that I've saw from him. And he's one of the guys that I go to in those situations and just kind of pick his brain a little bit. Hey, Larry, here's what's going on. Just want to get your thoughts on what you think would be, kind of the right thing to do in this situation, because I've been so impressed by him being able, to make those decisions, on the fly. And then when you look back on it, it was absolutely the right thing to do, the right way to go down that path. So I'm really excited for him. I think he's one of the guys that was really outspoken about, and this is from all of our coaches. They had conversations with everybody they drafted. They got on the phone with everybody they drafted that night. And they continued that the next day when we did 23 rounds. We shortened the time. We were taking 5-minute breaks between the rounds. They were getting right on the telephone and getting on and making sure they had a contact with those guys. That was one of the things that they really enjoyed. And one of the things that you hinted to were a guy like Larry Fedora, college game, the heck with that. This is awesome. Picking my guys, talking to them on the phone, building that connection. I'm really excited to see, what Larry's going to do down in New Orleans. I thought they had an outstanding night too. I mean, to me, Kirby Wilson in Pittsburgh and Larry Fedora in New Orleans, two guys that I think there was probably some questions about how they were going to perform in that environment. I thought they did an outstanding job. So, kudos to Chris Watts and Matt Bookmeyer, who were side by side with him. Kevin Sumlin is working with a guy that I've worked in the Alliance and in the XFL with, Bob Morris, longtime scout, longtime coach. So he sees football from both sides of that coin. And Bob is great. He's going to be fantastic for Kevin. Kevin's another one. Kevin could be an NFL coach any day he wants to be an NFL coach. I mean, he's got that persona to him, in my opinion. He's got that swagger to him. Unflappable. We were in certain situations where things were coming down to the wire and we're trying to make decisions. And Kevin is just always the same. He's never too high. He's never too low. Had a great conversation with him today. He goes, I told you I wasn't going to bother you until March 1st. He goes, guess what today is? I said, it's March 1st. He goes, yeah, I got some questions. So he's just that type of guy. He is what you see. I'm excited to see what he does. I'm just excited for this whole 8 because we're going to ask a lot of them. We're going to ask them to adjust on the fly. We're going to ask them to bear with us on a lot of different items. And to this day, they have done exactly that. They get that this is a startup. Everybody's in it for each other. And these guys have been absolutely phenomenal teammates for us to take this first step with. Now we've got to do one thing, because this may have been information from Mike Pereira, is Mike Pereira tries to downplay the impact of Todd Haley in the USFL. We haven't talked about Todd Haley yet. We did the head coaches seminar, and I was sitting across from Mike Pereira, and he looked at me and he goes, I hear you're responsible for getting Todd Haley into the league. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And they have butted heads throughout their careers. And he goes, you and I are going to have a talk. So I had to tell Todd, I said, all right, I've already been warned by Mike Pereira that you have to behave on the sideline. But he's another guy that I'm really excited to see have an opportunity because, things in the NFL, didn't finish the way that Todd would have wanted him to finish. He's been away from the game for a little while. But, just hearing how his players think about him, we were visiting during the draft that time, and he's getting ready for it. And it was Alejandro Villanueva, and I can't remember. I think it was David DeCastro. We're down in Florida driving home, and kind of came, like an hour off their track to come see Todd at his house down in South Florida on the Gulf Coast. And he had an evening with him. He goes, I thought they were going to come in for a couple of hours and then get on their way. He goes, they stayed past midnight. We just told stories, and, it was so good to reconnect with them. That to me means the world when players want to spend time with their coaches away from the game of football. It was one of the things that our championship teams had in Dallas. On Thursday night, we would go out to dinner. We would have 10 to 12 players, 6 to 8 coaches. We'd go to dinner, then we'd go bowling at down Carter Lanes. We actually enjoyed being around each other outside of the facilities. We were friends. The coaches were mentors to us. We talk about football as being a second family, and we really had that in Dallas. And having Todd tell me that story, I could really see the sense that that's something that Todd likes to do. He likes to build that culture, that sense of second family. And for these two guys, just being, in the area and then driving out, spending some extra time to come out and visit with him, and then staying as long as they did, that was an affirmation to him, confirmation to him that, I'm in this not just to help these guys, but to build relationships. So I'm excited to see what Todd does there. With everything that he's doing, is the coach for the Tampa Bay Bandits. He's another guy, kind of under the radar a little bit, not a lot of splash, but a lot of consistency, last Tuesday and Wednesday building that roster.
You draft Jordan Ta'amu, you draft Brady White, who, by the way, broke a bunch of the records that Paxton Lynch set at Memphis. You're going to get some attention for that. But more than anything else, I was getting to talk with Jordan Ta'amu about this, and they got to know each other for the first time. But I also got to see the ball coach come out and Coach Haley immediately. We're sitting over to the side. Coach Haley walks by, sees us talking, and says, mine? I said, go right ahead, Coach. That's your quarterback. He says, tell me 3 things about you. Not football related. 3 best attributes. Go. And he is absolutely staring him down, wanting to know the answer to these questions. And you'll see them at foxsports.com. But your story about Coach Holtz was particularly cool to me because I was privileged to be at day 2, right? And one of the first things that happens is, hey, we had a wide receiver added to the draft pool here late. Here's who he is. Here's where he went to school. Here it is. Let us know if you want him. And he gets drafted the same day as well. I thought that was awesome. But also to the point about Coach Sumlin, I made a point to ask him in the middle of day 1, how this is going. Does the time limit actually mess with you or how do you function with that? He says, no. I mean, look, it's 2 minutes today. It's going to be 90 seconds tomorrow. It's going to be 60 seconds by the end. So it's getting faster. You either get with it and get it on, or, you let it beat you up. And to have that sort of level-headedness and demeanor about what you're doing is why he's a head coach. And quite frankly, again, Oklahoma guy, I remember him at OU, and I remember the battle that he had with Coach Fedora when they were Conference USA coaches, Houston and Southern Miss. I'm excited about that. You got some built-in rivalries here that I want to discuss, but one of those, I hope, is going to be the Philadelphia Stars versus the Michigan Panthers. We haven't spoken a bit about Coach Andrus, but my first thought was, quarterback's coach for Steve McNair. Maybe he could teach quarterbacks 1 or 2 things about what to do. And talking to Brian Scott, he's like exactly that dude, right? We're going to throw the ball 30, 40 times a game. He's going to trust me. And I wonder, what's it like for you to know that you have a guy like Bart Andrus that the world is getting ready to really get to understand and know, especially after the success he's had professionally and lately of the spring league?
Yeah, exactly. Right. He's been involved in so many of the different leagues, from the NFL to the CFL to NFL Europe to the spring league. He's done it at every level. And again, if there's one word that you'll continue to hear me say, it's passion, passion for the game. And Bart is another one of those guys that has passion for the game. Kind of gets in our blood and it's hard to get it out. It's different motivations, for Bart. Bart's a guy that loves to develop guys and give them the opportunity. I'm excited to see, what Philadelphia does, behind his leadership. He was with us in the XFL with Team 9, so we had kind of a component built in there in case anybody got hurt. We didn't want to have to go to the street and bring somebody in and maybe they weren't working out, they weren't in shape. We really didn't have time for that. Bart was able to fill that void for us in his role with really nothing to play for, but an opportunity. Possibly he was able to keep all these guys motivated and working hard. So to see him now in an opportunity in this league to kind of raise to a platform and a visibility level that maybe he hasn't had in a while, I'm excited to see what he does with that. Again, a lot of success in the spring league that he has had. He's got his quarterback, and that's one of the other things. I think when you look around this league, you're going to see talent, but also a familiarity with the style of play and how that fits into our offense. And that was really the case, with Bart and with Brian. There's a familiarity there. They've been there, done that before. They're kind of automatically ahead of the curve of everybody else because they're not starting at square one. They're starting at square seven. So this is going to be a fun thing to watch, especially early in the season. How does Philadelphia come out of the gates because of the familiarity with the head coach and the quarterback?
Oh, and I look right now, if I'm making bets, I got to look at Philadelphia some kind of way because you got a former spring league MVP, you got a former championship combo in the head coach and the quarterback, and you got a quarterback that was there for every single round of the draft going, we like this guy. I would love to play with that guy. I don't want to play against that guy. That was exciting for me to hear and see. But I got a couple questions for you, and then we'll get you out of here, Mr. Johnston. The first one is, who do you think could be the best offensive player in this league?
That's a great question. It's always a quarterback-driven league. That gives you the opportunity, but the supporting cast is always that unknown. Let's just go to the NFL and the greatest of all time in Tom Brady. The reason Tom Brady went to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is because he looked at that roster and said, this gives me the best opportunity to continue to win Super Bowls because look at the talent that's going to be around me. That's going to be the most important thing. So we've talked a lot about these quarterbacks and, how they're going to do. It really comes down to the supporting cast. And for me, it's always the offensive line. The one thing that I was really impressed with was the skill level of the offensive line. You mentioned that early in this conversation, RJ. You can have great skill players, but if you don't have an offensive line that can open running lanes or pass protect, it doesn't matter how good everybody else is. So that's going to be one of the key things. So for me, as we start to dig into this, I really want to dig into the offensive lines. Obviously tackle is a big position, but we've seen how important guard center guard has become. And that's one of the things that I saw throughout the course of the draft night was size, big schools where these guys were coming from. They're going to be well coached. They're going to understand the big moments in the games. So it's going to be hard for me to really kind of single out one guy. If I had to look at somebody, one of the guys that I kind of looked at on film is Mark Thompson, a running back who kind of got lost in the shuffle a little bit with COVID and with a hamstring pull. When he did have some opportunities to go to a camp, he was one of the running backs that I looked at that just, okay, why is this guy not in the NFL? So you kind of go into his story and you find out, some of the challenges that he's had and some of them recently. And I reached out to him and spoke to him directly. This is somebody who's learned from his mistakes, knows that he's missed an opportunity and knows that the clock is running on him. I'm excited to see what Mark Thompson does with this opportunity because I think he's one of those guys that knows that there's not a lot of time left for him. And if he's going to have that opportunity to get to the NFL level, he's got to have a breakout season in the USFL. And when you watch him on film, he is fully capable of doing that. Executive
Vice President, Football Operations, Daryl Moose Johnston, my father's favorite fullback and one of our favorite Dallas Cowboys of all time. Thank you so much, sir, for the time.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. We always enjoy talking football, especially with somebody that has that knowledge of it and that passion for the game as well.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for watching this video. And remember, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any other videos on the #1 ranked show YouTube channel.